I'm Ryan Katsanis from Vancouver, Washington. Welcome to The Candid Frame.
Nelson Mandela said, he learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. It's a sentiment that is invaluable, not only when you're combating inequality and injustice. It's also true when your personal dreams and aspirations come up against insecurity, self-doubt, and fear. It was this shared awareness of the role of fear in their creative lives that brought together photographers Sarah Marie Rooney and Sasha Dillon Bell to collaborate on a series of conceptual portraits they called Fear of Dreaming. Though they each had achieved success in their respective creative careers, Sarah in musical theater and Sasha in film, they each found themselves wrestling with fear as they strived to express themselves through photography.
I just started a 6-month job on something, and at the beginning I had a week-long meltdown just in the company I was keeping, and that's not unusual, and that's the plus, is knowing that it's not unusual. And even though I was sweating it, I was like, just get through it, just keep your head down, just do what you do, and trust that I've learnt that, though. That's come over a long period of time. When you're in a new medium, though, it's amplified for sure. And that was certainly part of the decision to do it. It was like, all right, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Like, get in there and face this stuff.
Their work culminated not only in a limited-run book, but a pop-up interactive exhibition, which invited people to write down their own fears as part of the installation. It resulted in an intimate experience of not only the photographs, but the very feelings that inspired them.
Many people wrote about fear of not having enough money to survive. Really heavy stuff. And not only, it didn't stop there. People actually talked about it. People on the night, we're all dressed up and it's like a hype. And people were really talking to me about fear, like what they were afraid of, and thanking me and thanking Sasha for having this opportunity to express themselves. Somebody said that they had never, ever, ever said what they were truly afraid of, and they did it on the night.
We'll talk to Sarah and Sasha about their unique collaboration and how they survived and thrived after their own worst creative moments. This is Ibari and X, and welcome back to The Candid Frame. So thanks for coming down, or coming up.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you had a long drive from the beach.
The LB.
The LB. Oh my God, you get this lingo down, huh?
All of 3 months, and I'm totally local now.
The LB.
I don't know if that's a thing, actually.
Yeah,
maybe it is.
Be, yeah.
It is now.
The Dina. I think that's what that's up here. The Dina. I don't know if anyone refers to it as the Dina.
The Dina.
LB, the Dina, and WeHo is up in this.
And we live in La La.
Man. Well, I'm real pleased to sit down with you guys because I didn't get to go to your opening, but I did get to see a presentation in Pasadena, and I'd seen the work, but I was really struck by the presentation, especially because of sort of the topic of fear, which is something I've talked about before on the show, but it was really kind of interesting for me to hear you guys sort of touch on it in terms of that was sort of the germ of the collaboration between the two of you. So how did that sort of come about? Where did the discussion begin that you guys thought you wanted to work together, but that you wanted to tackle this idea of fearing of dreaming?
I think that we both have this sense of this same fear, right? As artists and collaborators and working together, there is a sense of being afraid of what's going to happen next, to how you're going to move forward with your dreams. And so we sat down together one day and said, we want to do something more. We were street shooting at the time, working together, having a great time, fluidly working together. And we said, we're both afraid of this, right? I'm afraid of maybe lighting, or I'm afraid of, this technical photography skills, right? And we wanted to try something different. We wanted to push our boundaries, and we started out actually trying to just do something totally different. in a collaboration. So, Sasha, I'm going to leave it over to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it was just a chance to work together and do something a bit more substantial. And the second the idea of fear, we mentioned this at the open show. There was this feeling as new photographers in a lot of ways, even though we'd been doing it a little while for ourselves. This idea of doing something with more substance felt like frauds in a lot of ways. And this is something I can only speak for myself, and I'm sure Sarah shares this. I've felt like a fraud throughout my creative career. I do every job, even now, aside from my photography, every job. And I have to keep reminding myself of this. So the idea of doing a project that just puts it out on Front Street, tacks it head on and goes, all right, we're afraid of this, guys. And like it or don't like it, we're putting it out there. And I don't think there was a sense that we would necessarily put it out there at the time, but as things progressed, that was the natural way it went. And I think that the idea of this fear and facing that fear, that was part of it. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. To me.
But define sort of the fear, because one of the things is people think they understand what fear is. Everyone knows what it feels like. But both of you are going to attempt to create something together. So how each of you sort of experience fears, how it manifests in your body and in your head can be very, very different. So can you talk about how you sort of each came to understand how the other experienced fear creatively?
Interesting. That's a really interesting question. I mean, I'm sure we both have answers for this, but for me, it was a question of searching some of the feelings that I was going through and finding a way to express that, which is where the idea for both of us came through of having a dancer, having someone who could really express some of our emotions physically, bold gestures, violent gestures, gentle gestures, the idea of fear, the idea of creativity. And we trusted, I think it's safe to say we just trusted that our working collaboration up to that point was such that we could just, on the day, just give and take. I think that's probably the clearest way I can think to say it, to give and take and allow each other to explore with the dancer, kind of translating some of these emotions. And then it'd be me shooting and then Sarah shooting, and sometimes we were shooting together. And when we weren't shooting, we were supporting each other. But I think, for me, I knew when I had the shots that I needed, and I let it. It was like, your turn, right? I mean,
absolutely, yeah. It was a dance for us, as photographers dancing together. I think we have a rhythm when we work together. Then we have a dancer physically dancing, so it's easy to go around. But in order to communicate that fear, individually, but come up with a body of work, I think that's because it's partly a universal theme, right? As artists, as people, as human beings, we all experience fear, this fear of thinking outside the box, thinking bigger, pushing past, going further, taking risks and being afraid to fail, being afraid to succeed as well. It's not just fear of failure, but sometimes it's fear of success, because now you've got to show up, you got to be there, and you got to have your A game, and you're going to be challenged in a different way. And then it's going to go to the next level. And so that's scary and exciting and exhilarating. So I think this sense of humanity that we all feel this helped us end up with a body of work that makes sense. And at the same time, we also worked together we both come from film and then theater backgrounds, right? So we have a production, I think, going on here. It's a production. It's not just shots. We worked in movements, actually. So it was very musical. Music was a big part of our shoot.
Definitely.
Dance, physicality, visceral emotions were part of it. And we had certain shots that we wanted to take, of course, because, we worked as a production. So we had, set pieces and props and costume changes and makeup changes, hair changes. And so we each had certain things that we really wanted out of that. And it was amazing to see how much preparation went into it, but then luck on the day and our, just style fitting together. What happened? The magic happened when we started getting into the after, looking into our pictures together.
The project has a series of sequences, chapters, basically sort of illustrating navigating through fear. So tell me about how you guys came to, wanting to demark the whole process of experiencing, moving through, and moving past past fear?
Well, for me, it was a way of putting. It's almost a way of giving hope.
Yeah.
It was like getting through my own fears by channeling them through another character. It was a way of disconnecting a little bit. It's like this character, we can see the birth of fear, and in the project we see that, we physically see that, and then we see the violence of fear, and we see, the twisted nature of fear. But as the project progresses, she kind of transforms more into her creativity and finding this flow. And we're very conscious of that, by the way. We wanted her movement to change with that change. But the idea is, for me, was at the end, it would be, this idea of, yes, you got through at least this stage of feeling this fear. Yeah, I mean, that was what it was for me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a circle, and it always comes back around. Fear always is lurking behind my back. There's the next thing. There's always the next thing. So it was a surprise to see in the pictures that we end the book with a picture called The End or the Beginning. And she's gone through this whole transformation into light, and seeing the light, and it's playful and joyous. And when we showed it at the open show in Pasadena a couple weeks ago, when we got to the pictures of light, there was this enormous sigh. I don't know if you felt it on your necks, but there was just this relief. That
I felt that relief.
Yes, I was so grateful to be out of the fear and into the light. But yet it comes around again, So the last picture in our series as it stands is she's got fear on her back. And I think that's something that, I don't know, that demarcation of movements and chapters, looking at this as very clear points in your life. And it could be micro points in your life. It doesn't have to be a big project or a big event. It could just be something like your day, your hour, your minute, that you have all of these stages, and it's a circle, and it comes back around again. And then you pull yourself back up, and you shine, and you succeed. And then there's the next thing, whether it's because you're choosing things that way, or because circumstances, or because it's just how, I guess, the life cycle works, maybe.
Yeah. What was interesting for me, and one of the reasons that really inspired me to bring you guys on, was that each of you in your lives have had successes in your respective careers. You as a singer and in musical theater and education, and you as an editor, a director, and a writer. And it was really interesting that, you mentioned earlier about always feeling like a fraud and probably feeling fear throughout. But a lot of people, when they look at your careers, they see what you've managed to accomplish. And for me, the whole idea is, it's kind of interesting that in a variety of different ways, you've achieved success that a lot of other people would admire, but that doesn't eliminate the possibility that fear will manifest itself when you go into some other realm of creativity. And it's kind of interesting that it's like, your credits aren't transferable.
I don't even
the credits that we have are
within.
Yes, exactly. Full of fear.
Absolutely. I just started a 6-month job on something, and at the beginning I had a week-long meltdown just in the company I was keeping, and that's not unusual. Mm-hmm. And that's the plus, is knowing that it's not unusual. And even though I was sweating it, I was like, just get through it. Just keep your head down. Just do what you do, and trust that I've learned that, though. That's come over a long period of time. When you're in a new medium, though, it's amplified for sure. Mm-hmm. And that was certainly part of the decision to do it. It was like, all right, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Like, get in there and face this stuff. It doesn't make it go away, though. Not for me. Not for you either, right?
No, I mean, I, as a singer and educator, all of those things that you mentioned, absolutely. And some I was more confident with. But my personal singing on stage with a piano and recitals and languages and concerts, just me and, all the audience. And it was always terrifying. And I had meltdowns all the time. There was my first meltdown was before my very first recital that I was producing myself. And I really don't tell the story very often, but it is worth sharing, I think, while we're being vulnerable about this project, right? So, and I was in Fred Meyer's at the store in Oregon, and I just saw somebody doing their job at like 9 o'clock on a Friday night, and I was about to go into my dress rehearsal the next day, and then my very first performance, I was very, young, And I literally fell on the ground crying because I was like, I just want a job without, although that person probably had a lot of pressure that I don't know about. My perception was, I just want something that I don't have to be so afraid of, because if you mess up, if you forget a lyric, if you drop a beat, if you, gosh forbid, sing off pitch, you're ruined, in my mind. It's like,
Isn't
too
it
tough.
Isn't it weird though that the second you stop caring, the work? It's like
I know.
It's I don't know. It's almost like you care, which is why you're afraid that you're not going to service the end goal, the end what you really want to kind of get out into the world.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that you both chose the word meltdown, that you had a meltdown.
It was a meltdown. I can't think of a better way to say it.
But that didn't bring an end to your respective careers, right?
No, it was the first start.
But still, talk about that, because that moment of absolutely being in despair is part of what keeps people from doing it.
True.
So what allowed you, despite the fact that you felt like you were literally going to die in those moments, and you may not know how you're going to get through it, but you did. But what was it? What variety of things, or maybe a singular thing? What were those things that allowed you to sort of move past that absolute despairing panic, fear, and still do what you needed to do?
I think it's passion. I am an artist in my soul, creatively, whether I'm a singer then or photography now. I love sharing, I love being on stage, so to speak, And, something my dad always told me was when I'd go, for singing, that it was, you know this the best in this moment in time. Nobody else can do it like you right now. Somebody else might be able to do it. He didn't get into all that, but, my brain processed it like that. But it's that I right now I've practiced the 25,000 hours, it takes, and I know it right now. So I would just kind of come back to that, a passion. I loved it. It's who I am. It's a chance to be, expressive with people and share. And at the same time, just kind of falling back on that sense of like, I've done this so many times. I can do it. But it's hard to hard to pull out. But yeah, that's joy.
And there's something to be said for putting yourself in a position where you can't really pull out. The consequences are too big. The first time I had a meltdown, I'm doing inverted quotation marks, whatever, was my first big feature. When I was cutting my first feature, I was working with a big Australian cast. I was working with a very famous Australian director. I was so a fish out of water. It was ridiculous. I somehow locked into this opportunity. But there was some real technical challenges with that film. At the time, no film had ever been shot in the world on this particular technology. And I won't bore everyone with post-production jargon, but it was beyond a challenge of just telling the story. It was a challenge of dealing with the technical and the barrage of dailies being footage coming through every day. And long story short was that first week, I'm sure I lost most of my hair, which is where I'm at right now. But I couldn't not, like, I'd put myself in this position where I could not leave. It was too big. I'd worked too hard to get to this point. Even though I didn't think I was going to get through it, I didn't really have a choice. So I just did what I knew how to do at the time, which was just do the work. I know it's crazy and I know the hours are crazy, and just do the work. Cut to that film having all kinds of success and me kind of growing as an artist through that, and me having these experiences even to this day. I think now I consciously or subconsciously, or I don't even really know what, I think I put myself in a position where I can't pull out. Certainly true with this project. It's definitely true with the last thing I mentioned, this project I've just come off. I think I'm looking for those opportunities, because if I don't, I'm not going to grow, and I really want to grow. I want to grow as an artist. I want to share. I want to get better, and that only happens by putting yourself in these uncomfortable positions, Oh,
I've learned that so many times. Anytime I'm resistant to doing something or uncomfortable, that's usually the very thing that I need to be doing. Because if I just play it safe, I'm just retreading. And if I do it for too long, I get incredibly frustrated.
Yeah.
part of your ability to get past those moments, how much of it was it that you were relying on your confidence in terms of the technical, you in terms of singing, and you know what you need to do with your voice and with your body, and you just the skills that you had practiced in terms of working with film and in terms of telling a story or narrative. How much of it was the fact that you knew that, and how did that compare to your experience as photographers, where you didn't feel like you may have had as much knowledge as you would have liked to have had as compared to what you were doing before? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, definitely. So from a singing perspective, if I pull myself out of the emotional thought of it, right, I can fall back on my credentials and I can say, yes, technically I know what I'm doing. And then you push, and then that voice creeps in and says, but there's always somebody better, or there's always something more, and so you go, okay, get away. And then I think to the last question as well, it's risk and reward, right? So the risk is great, but the reward when you succeed it's a high. It's an adrenaline rush. It's the feeling with all these people applauding you, and the after this, after the show, congratulations, and the feeling of just like your own accomplishment, is wonderful. So that I think can be, fueling some of that fire too, And then I find like when we approach fear of dreaming or photography in general, it's also a risk and reward. Going out on the street and, you don't know what you're going to run into, but the reward of capturing that picture or having an interaction that you wouldn't have had otherwise, those are great, rewards. I think that absolutely we went into this project, certainly me, I think the two of us, Sasha, would agree, is that we went into this knowing we did not know a lot of things. We wanted to test out some funny stories we can tell later if you want, but like the lighting, we wanted to test out lighting. We wanted to test out some of the backlighting from the sun that was going to come through, which is why we rented the studio with this big window. And none of those things happened. And we were, but it, we knew, we kept saying we're going to just play. We just want to play. We just want to experiment. We just want to try new things. And at the same time, the professionals in us pulling from our backgrounds needed to have it super organized and have it super conceptualized and have it very much down to a T. And at the same time, we wanted it to just be like, throwing cards in the air and seeing what landed. That's
true of filmmaking. It's that thing of being so prepared that you're allowed to just get on set and let things happen. It's like if you're prepared, you can allow things to happen. That was certainly something that gave me confidence going into Fear and Dreaming. But I'd also say that what gave me confidence in Fear of Dreaming was knowing that you were there.
Oh,
because I'm pointing to Sarah, by the way. That was a big thing because it gave us permission to play. And we did keep saying that. We were like, the professional in us were both so focused when it came to preparations, but we kept on having those conversations in the lead up of, hey, there's maybe 2 shots that we really want to get, or this shot, but hey, let's be mindful just to let Bethany, our amazing performer who deserves a shout out, Bethany.
Yeah, Bethany Coyle.
Yeah, letting her play and letting her show us things that we can discover. And I think the preparation helped and having each other helped. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, having each other, having Sasha there all through the entire process, even up to right now as we're speaking, is wonderful.
It's been a journey, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You guys are nice and syncing with each other.
We discovered that the first time we shot together, which was in your class, actually, Berenice.
Okay.
It's this street shooting class. We just happened to get paired together, and we just found a fluidity. We found a support.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was this idea of, I think we both very quickly saw, oh, you're seeing that. How can I help, or how do I not get in the way?
Yep.
And vice versa, right?
Absolutely.
And we went out and shot a couple more times before we realized, hey, this symbiosis kind of works. How do we put this into something with meat,
Yeah. Yep. Something a little more planned, yet completely spontaneous on the day.
Yeah. What you just mentioned, I thought, was one of the more interesting aspects of the project, because you had mentioned that there were certain shots that you wanted to get. And it was great to hear and see that you guys allowed sort of the unexpected, those welcome surprises. Because I think sometimes fear can control the process too much, to the point that you create exactly what you intended to create. And I think that's all well and good, but there's something about serendipity, the unexpected, those surprises that really can elevate any form of art, but in particular photography, to a whole new level. I know some people are very exacting in terms of their compositions, and kudos to them.
Right.
But for me, it can't work that way, because I feel like I rely on the things beyond what I could have formulated, anticipated, to play into it. And that's really sort of an important part of not letting fear own you in those moments, especially when you're being creative, because fear oftentimes is sort of leading up to the moment.
Yes.
And the only solution for it is to actually just throw yourself into the pool and start making the work.
Yeah.
Those first shots, it's true when you're directing film as well. Those first shots are the worst, and it was so awkward. It was so awkward. Do you remember?
Yes.
When we first got in there, I think Sarah shot first, and there was this whole who should shoot first. There was this whole awkwardness, and then it was this awkwardness as we both composer shots. But as Bethany started to move, there was this moment. I felt it. I don't know when it hit you, but I remember going, "Oh, I see the shot I want." And then you saw me do that reaction, and you went,
"Absolutely.
What do you see?" You said, "What do you see? What do you see?" And I go, I said, it's okay. I'll do it when you're finished. I'll do it when you said, you go. You see the shot, go. And then all of a sudden it was on.
It was on.
And it's true for most things that I've ever worked on, is getting those first steps it's not easy,
Back to singing, it's, those first 3 or 4 or 5 notes, passages, phrases, whatever. It's like, oh my gosh, my heart, breathing, thinking about all the technical, and then the rest of the hour, 2 hours, it's gone. I don't even know, but that was exactly like that. Like, you just have to click the button like X amount of times, and then everything's going to be fine. You just go into your creative space.
Well, I want each of you to share a moment of failure that you guys experience in your respective careers, because that's one of the biggest fears. You mentioned it's either fear of failure or fear of success. So let's talk about failure. And
oh my God, this is something I never... Okay, so this is like in our past, like my
in your
singing.
Past. Uh-huh.
Okay, well, you know what? I hope by saying this out loud, because I've never really said it, but I hope saying it out loud will make me forget about it or come to grips with it a little bit better. But I did forget a lyric in a recital, and it was awful. It was like your worst fear. Like, literally, I alluded to it earlier, worst fear. I was singing a Clara Schumann piece, Frauenleben Leben song cycle, and I'd sung that cycle, for a couple of years previously, not regularly, but, and I rested on my laurels. I was like, oh, I've done this before. I didn't practice it as much as I should have, or probably should have, I had done it, but for this particular event, that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Missing it. And just the piano player, who is my regular accompanist, we worked together for 4 or 5 years, and he just kept starting the song over and over again. And I'm like, can't think of what to say. And seeing the audience's face suddenly realize that there was a problem and panicking. And, and I've always been very true with my performances, that vulnerability in the character of whoever I was singing or portraying. So I just owned it, and I said, I'm super sorry, or something like that. I don't know what I said, but I stopped, which is like a really big no-no in the performance world. And I walked over to the piano, and I looked at the music, and I gathered my thoughts for a second, which seemed like 7,000 years. And then I came back, and we continued, and I had to finish. That was in the first half of the performance, and then I had to take an intermission and come back for the second act. I couldn't have gotten out of that performance faster. Like, that was such a hard thing to have happen to me. And I don't know, maybe it sounds crazy to the listeners.
How did the audience react when you came back and you just...
They were kind, and nobody, I saw one person kind of rolling her eyes.
Oh, no.
I know.
Well, we have a tendency to be, there are 1,000 people in the room, we find the one, right?
I sound like I need therapy, right?
No, because I'm the same way. There can be 1,000 people in the room, I'm doing a presentation, and then there's one guy who's like, has his arm crossed and shaking his head, and I'll be fixated on that one guy, even though everybody else thought I was wonderful.
How do we find that person?
I know. She was like out of the back, all the way at the back, and I don't have good sight, so I don't know how I saw her.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. Clap, clap, clap. She was throwing the tomatoes. But yeah, I mean, it was a bit, to your point, it was a way bigger deal in my mind than it was to anybody else. And I'm sure anybody that listens to this that would have seen that concert would probably not even know what I'm talking about at this point. But, to me, it was like the biggest failure you can have on stage, literally. I mean, I would have rather fallen, or, I don't even know what. But yeah, that was pretty bad. So, but I got up. That was early in my career as well. And I got up and I did many more recitals after that.
Wow.
And you kept going.
And I kept going. And I just kept thinking, well, it's only going to happen once in your life. So at least I got it out. At least I did it. And now I don't have to worry about doing that again. Fingers crossed.
Wow. I can't think of a specific thing in my creative career. There's so many, and I think I'm blocking them out right now. I'm putting it on the spot. But one thing I do struggle with, and have struggled with, and continue to, is this idea of failure with time. So I have wanted to be a creator since I could walk, and for decades, I wasted time avoiding that. And I did. I avoided it. I don't have the money. I need to do this. I need to do that. All this idea of avoiding this idea of failing. I didn't know it at the time. I can identify it now. Until one day I woke up and I was like, I need to do this. I need to do it right now. I'm constantly battling that. I'm constantly battling meeting amazing 20-year-olds who have incredible work, and I'm constantly amazed at everyone around me, to be honest with you. But this idea of I've failed because I've lost 20 years of my life, or I've failed because of this, it's something that certainly fuels me, but it's not easy to deal with.
Oh, I go through that all the time. Seriously, especially when I teach the classes and I see people, 20, 30 years younger than me, and they just kick ass and they produce amazing stuff. And I just go, oh, what the hell was I doing with my life?
Yeah, right.
But I think everyone comes to it at a different place, because right now is the most confident I've ever felt about myself.
That's
period.
Awesome.
First time. And it doesn't mean that those insecurities aren't there, but as a human being and as a creative, I'm happy where I'm at right now. There's some things I would like to have changed, but that's sort of been a hard one. And I think it's a hard place to come to. I mean, I get my fear and my insecurities that come up all the time. And sometimes it manifests itself for me in procrastination, delaying things, like you said, putting things off. But I've been thinking that some of the things that I've procrastinated about, when I think about them, were things I really didn't want to be doing, but I thought I should be doing them.
Yeah.
Oh, you just hit something.
Me too.
Yeah.
So sometimes that fear has been good, but just because I wasn't able to differentiate.
Yeah.
So I want you guys to sort of talk about that idea.
About procrastination.
The whole idea, that fear, fear manifesting itself in procrastination, but differentiating between things you really sort of want to do and fear being a way of saying, giving you the excuse not to do something you really don't want to do. Like for me, anything in regards accounting in terms of money, I will endlessly procrastinate about just because I feel very ill-equipped to be able to do it. And even when I do it, I find myself just making mistakes. You know how they have dyslexia for words?
Yeah.
I think I may have dyslexia when it comes to numbers.
I think I do too.
Because
I hear you.
I'm in a men's group and I'm the treasurer this year. And every time I go to do the spreadsheet, I'm always finding my numbers off. And no matter how many times I think I'm doing it right, and it just throws me back to when I was in elementary school or high school, junior high school, doing math and getting the first formulas or whatever right, and then at some point I start doing things wrong and just feeling at a complete loss. And that sort of has just extended to my life now. That's why I want to let my wife do the numbers.
And then there's this inner monologue that tells you you're going to mess it up, and then you.
But I took on the challenge in my men's group to do the accounting just to say, okay, I'm uncomfortable doing this, and I'm just going to try and do it anyway. But normally it was just like, okay, I'll just sort of delay it. Yeah. But there are other things that I feel the fear, I procrastinate about, but I really want to do, but that fear has me by the throat. So I think there's just two
Yeah.
I'm asking you two things, but you can respond in whatever way you want.
Well, I mean, procrastination's, I think, the catchphrase of every artist I've ever met in some way, and we all have our weaknesses. Mine, numbers, I think we all share that. I think procrastination is, I don't know. I feel like it's no, I'm blanking all of a sudden.
I can jump
please
in,
take it. Go,
So,
save me, Sal.
Okay, this is a really hard question.
It is.
Even harder than the last one where I was like so vulnerable and I'm like, here's my biggest failure. I find that projects like Fear of Dreaming super exhausting. Not this part of it. This is the fun part, getting to sit down and talk about your work. And the exhibition that we did on the night was, oh my gosh, my favorite night ever. But the getting to that shot, I find it really, really exhausting because I just put so much into it. I did another project. It's a personal project and it's totally not finished yet. And this is to the point, right? It's called Everyone Loves Luciano, my dog Luciano. And everyone loves him, and I want to take my camera out and photograph 24/7 of people interacting with Luciano. I love it. I've started it a million times. And I have about 10 pictures to show and maybe one picture that's good,
okay.
So that is a fear I have that I really want to do this project. It's important to me. He's 8 years old now. He's, hopefully got another 25 years in his life, but realistically, not so. And I am going to maybe be back on your show someday talking about that being my biggest failure because I didn't do it. Like if I don't take action.
Yeah.
And it's so hard for me. And as much as I love people and I love talking to people, I'm very extroverted. I find it really, really hard to have my dog and my camera and make good pictures that are worthwhile making. And I can hear myself coaching my own self right now saying, just take the picture, Don't prejudge it, But, this fear of failure. What if I bring my camera out and I've got Luciano and I make a bad picture and it's ridiculous. So that is something that I really want to do. I really need to do this. And time is of the essence because he's a subject that's 8 years old. Senior sprightly man.
He doesn't jump like one though.
Yeah, I know. He jumps like he's, I know.
He's a young man.
So that's something for me creatively, that the fear of wanting to do it, but the fear it's like wrapped together. They're not two separate things like accounting. It's wrapped together where I want to make these pictures. I want to make this work. And I've done it a few times and it's always been positive. Again, people have clapped and applauded, blah, blah, but maybe I'm not happy with the results. Maybe it's just uncomfortable for me to really try to take the time to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I was reading that in an explanation of procrastination is really a means of stress relief. By finding some other thing to do, whether it's like watching YouTube videos, playing a video game, washing the dishes, is that your anxiety builds up to the point that finding a distraction is a way of being able to sort of manage your emotions at that time. So I've been looking at it in that way, just so it isn't loaded with so much negativity.
Right.
Because I think part of when I was procrastinating in the past, it would just reinforce all the bad things I thought about myself.
Yes.
And then when I saw when I started thinking about procrastination just being another tool for me just to be able to get through these sort of difficult emotions in different moments, it was like, oh, okay, maybe it isn't evidence of my my defects.
Yeah.
My,
it's actually your body coping and managing the stress.
Yeah.
Right? That sounds wonderful.
No, I
am subscribing to that philosophy.
I know which one I'm choosing because it's made a difference for me, because I'll recognize when I'm procrastinating.
Yeah.
And it gives me a chance to think about, is this something that I really want to do or not?
Exactly.
And if it's something that I really want to do, how can I break this up into bite-sized pieces so that I can not have to look at the entire thing?
Bite-sized
it's
chunks.
Like writing a book.
Yep.
I mean, the way I managed to write my first book and every book subsequently was to think about each chapter as a magazine article, which I'd had lots of experience doing. Because when I first signed that contract for that first book, it was like a couple of months before I started writing, because I was like, oh my God, I got to write a book. And then I went, well, I've written magazine articles. Why don't I just look at it as just each chapter is a magazine article?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I had a track record for doing that. And that's how I got through it. And I continue to get through it.
That's how I approach all my jobs now.
Yeah.
Even though it's still scary, but to break them down into tiny little nuggets. Yeah, it's great.
I'm going to apply that for Everyone Loves Luciano. I'm going to do it in movements, first movement, second movement, so on and so forth.
I was talking to some people yesterday, and they said the only time you really fail is when you don't try at all.
Absolutely.
And it's you just got to do it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because you got to surrender to that idea that it has to be perfect.
Yeah, there's this thing that's been holding me back, and we explored a little bit in Fear of Dreaming, but this idea of experimenting with light, which is something that's always daunted me because I've been surrounded by so many amazing cinematographers. So who the hell am I, right? Who the hell am I? So it's like I have avoided it, even though all of the people who I love, all the people who I'm responding to, certainly images that I respond to are all very cinematic, and lighting plays a big part. And I learned a lot in your class as well. But this year, to manage this, I've decided rain, hail or shine, no matter what job I'm on, and I typically work long hours, I am shooting 50 portraits. That means finding a model, even if it's my wife, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to light every one of these. And so far, I'm way ahead of schedule. It's about one a week. And what I'm finding is, I look at those first couple that I did in January, and it's embarrassing to me now, and how far I've come. Mm-hmm. And I like to think about where I'm going to be in 6 months' time. But the idea of all I have to worry about is one light in this shot, in today's shoot, and then maybe in a month's time, maybe I'll use 2 lights. Maybe if I'm ready. The idea of these tiny little bite-sized chunks to get you through a project or to grow, and it helps.
Your portraiture is looking amazing, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I'm enjoying seeing the growth.
Thank you.
I really, the one you did that you posted, Christina.
The Joshua tree, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Joshua, the music fan. That lighting was amazing.
Oh, thanks. I'm experimenting a lot with that stuff at the moment, and it's rewarding because when I went out on the day that you're talking about, it was to shoot an album cover, another situation where I'm just throwing myself in the deep end. I don't know what I'm doing, but it's like, okay, well, if I did know what I'm doing, how the hell would I approach this with simplicity and without a budget and without the bells and whistles? This was for a friend's album cover. It was like I saw it as an opportunity to do a project that was actually going to be seen by someone, even if it was 2 people. And so I went out there with what I did know, and what I found was all the rules got thrown the hell out the window the second I got out on location. And what I found was, as I'm sitting there and I'm trying to problem solve, and I have that tense moment where I'm like, oh God, this is not going to work, the subconscious starts kicking in, and it's like, well, I know this is not going to work, but just try it. And sure enough, right? And sure enough, something happens. It's like, oh, I don't like that, but what if I did this? Yeah. That's what I'm trying to embrace at the moment. This idea of little shoots with less pressure that allow you to grow in a bigger way. I
think that pursuit for constant growth is something that we probably all share in this room. We all want to grow. We all want to improve and get better and discover, and not just sit with our laurels, but keep making new things, or and also that idea of practice, right, where you've practiced something so many times so that when you get into the moment, that all goes out the window, or there's forces of nature that come through that you didn't expect, and you can just respond.
Help the Candid Frame to continue bringing you great conversations with some of the world's best photographers. You can do this by supporting our Patreon effort by committing as little as $5 or more a month. When you do this, you not only help us to meet the cost of production, but provide us the time and resources we need to bring you conversations you won't hear anywhere else. Sign up today by visiting patreon.com/The Candid Frame. Thank you.
And I love what you just said about that idea of, if I knew what I was doing, what would I do? I mean, really, that is...
Isn't it amazing how the brain kicks in, though? Mm-hmm. When you say that, when you ask that question?
There was someone I was watching, I think someone was speaking, and they were asking about and it may have been someone I interviewed or I was watching something, and they were talking about like documentary projects, and they would ask people, well, do you have an idea? And they said, no, I don't have an idea. I said, well, if you did have an idea, what would it be?
Yeah.
And then they said that they would answer the question at that point. And I think it's part of that first initial barrier is thinking about what you don't know and obsessing that, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know this. But if you're pressed, you go through, well, with what I do know, what do I think would be the solution? And then the application of it, trying to do it.
Exactly.
That puts you into the process of problem solving. And then you start getting the gears going. But until you move past that, I don't know, and because being in that space of I don't know is a space of complete paralysis.
Right. You can't move forward.
There's a lot to be said for momentum.
Yes.
A lot to be said for momentum, and that goes for anything you're doing, right? There's a lot to be said for momentum for sure. Yeah.
So did you guys, when you guys were kids, did you see yourselves as fearful kids?
Definitely
no.
not. Oh, both of us.
Oh, wow.
Hey, high five.
Look at that.
Okay, tell me
Not
about
in
that.
a little bit at all. I
Me
mean,
either.
the ham, every picture that anybody's in, I'm in the background photobombing before photobombing was a thing. I was the ham. I mean, I was fearless, like on stage, fearless in sports, fearless in travel, fearless in school.
Yeah, right
completely fearless. Friends with every different group of people, friends with, which is still a lot of those things are today, but just fearlessly doing it. 100% fearless.
I was introverted in a lot of ways, but I was fearless in a lot of ways. Physically, I was fearless. My mother thought I was going to grow up to be a stuntman. So did my sister. I'd do crazy stuff, and I would constantly be just trying things physically and being out there. Where I did shut down was people. If I didn't know people, it's still true to a lot of degrees these days. If I don't know people, I'm a bit introverted that way, which is interesting that that Sarah and I work together as, she's so extroverted, I'm quite introverted. But there was definitely a fearlessness there for sure.
So when did you start becoming aware of fear to the point that you realized that it was a hurdle?
For me, it was this idea of the time thing that I was talking about before. I think when you decide, I don't know when it was, what age, but when I decided, I won't do this thing because maybe it won't work out, that starts piling up. You say that once, and then it makes it easier to say that to yourself the next time, and you don't do something again, and then you don't do something again, and you don't do something again, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you are wondering why things aren't working out, and you don't feel great about yourself, and you don't necessarily know why. And then one day you might create something just out of some other form of momentum or just out of pure luck or whatever it is. Maybe you just have a good day and you start to realize, it takes me doing something, even if it's just a small thing to create.
How about you?
I think it started in and around university. I think that there's healthy competition and then there's very unhealthy competition. And I think right now where I'm at in my life, and actually right now where I'm at in my life, I'm surrounded by wonderful people, wonderful photographers, wonderful sense of community. Somebody said to me once, the best way that you're going to get work as a photographer is through another photographer. It's not a manager, it's not an agency, it's through your friends who are photographers, who see your work and they like you and they stand up for you and they root for you and they support you, and I found that to be very, very true. In university, it was not like that. Unfortunately, it was very much like, watch your back. I started with, I don't know, don't quote the numbers, but say 85, maybe it was less than 60 musical theater majors. We graduated with about 19. It was cut. Very ruthless, very rough, very break yourself down to build yourself up again. I am appreciative of my undergrad education, but I think that, all of my acting friends, theater friends from college, many of them feel the same way about that, situation. And unfortunately, I think that's when you started to I always have these Adam and Eve moments, where you suddenly realize you're in the garden naked, and you're exposed and you don't have shelter and you don't have cover, that I think that was around the time that my naivety started to come off, unfortunately. And it takes a long time to build that back up.
Yeah.
Be conscious of it too, right?
Yeah. And, and I'm very aware of, I say it all, like often, oh, this is an Adam and Eve moment. This is a moment where I'm in the garden, my naivety is off. I can see like exposure and maybe some hostility around. And it's just like, it's an uncovering of like, it's a loss of innocence, which is a shame, because I like to be innocent and like working in a happy bubble, in a happy world. So, it just takes time. It took time to get back from that, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I graduated. I made it through.
And here you are.
And here I am. Yeah, no, it's okay. But it's just, that was probably the time when I started to become much more fearful and aware that you had to, like, there was politics and there was games and there, it's not just about the work.
Yeah. That's great, because I was fearful from a little kid.
Were you?
Yeah. And so that sort of pervaded so much, especially my relationships with people. It's only the last maybe 10 or so years that I've gotten comfortable in my own skin and feel like I can hold my own and that I'm sort of okay. But I think that I wasn't as bold as I would like to think I am now.
With the red shirt you've got on, you're a superhero.
Not that I'm going to jump out of a plane, which my goddaughter did a couple of months ago. I just
Very
go,
cool.
Oh my God, she's like 18 and she jumped out of
Very
a plane and I was
cool.
just like, good for you. I don't know if I'm there yet. Her dad has been encouraging me to do it and I'm like,
You should do it.
Yeah,
You should do it. Have you done it?
I've done it. And
Me
it
too.
was one piece of advice for you and the listeners is...
Use the bathroom before?
Yes, there's that. And also don't just... I had the mistake of waking up and going to a nearby airport and just doing it first thing in the morning. So you go from yawning first thing in the morning to your heart going 1,000 miles an hour. I almost vomited in the middle of the air. It took my tandem instructor to say, no, don't do that.
Oh gosh.
You might kill somebody.
Oh gosh.
But it was amazing experience.
I had such a strange experience where I suddenly could not stop cursing out of nowhere. I just blah, 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 and then I started singing. Like I just started singing arias over Lake Taupo in New Zealand.
That is fantastic.
And it was like, and then we landed, and then I like fell asleep for about 24 hours. I think it was the adrenaline.
It's like a scene out of a movie.
It was crazy. I mean, because your adrenaline is so amped up,
So what's the boldest thing you've ever done? Where people would just go, they can't believe that, not just you, that anybody would just sort of...
I could tell you the stupidest thing I've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
Yay, let's hear it.
That would take another hour from all three of us. What was her name?
The story
my wife's
always
listening.
starts
Let's just
with,
calm down here.
we love you, Christina.
Shout out to Christina. No, when I was a kid speaking to this idea of everyone thought I was going to be a stuntman, I didn't even know how old I was. Maybe I was 7. My family lived in a high rise in Australia's Gold Coast, and I'm sure everyone can visualize. You've got the window to a high rise with no balcony, but you've got this tiny little windowsill that kind of goes around the building. Mm-hmm. I jumped out on that thing and I was running around it, and this thing must have been a couple of feet wide. And I'm just running around it, didn't think a thing of it. If I'd slipped, if a gust of wind had blown, I would have fallen to my death.
Oh my goodness, that's terrifying.
And it was just nuts. I mean, we can spend an hour in therapy talking about this later on, I guess. Yeah. What about you?
What is I guess I'm just known for traveling, like packing up my bags and moving overseas and...
Yeah, because you were in Australia, New Zealand.
London. Yep. Moved out here across the country by myself with my 3 animals in my car. Drove all the way across the country. I have to say I'm very proud of that because I am not a driver. I didn't get one speeding ticket. I didn't have, my animals all arrived safely with me.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So another fear that people have is sharing the work. It's one thing to create it. So I know you guys were working hard on that, that pop-up show that you guys did, but
Thanks.
Tell me about the feelings leading up to that and how you felt that night.
Oh my goodness.
I think it helped that we were doing it together.
Yes.
Sarah was the main. She was amazing setting
thanks.
that. Yeah, that was really something that she had a vision for the show. And for me, I just tried not to think about it, which is what I tend to do before something that terrifies me these days, anyway. But I think the hour before the show, I just went into this weird Zen place where I was just like, oh my God, it's happening. Like, people are going to see this and they're going to have that fake LA smile thing that they do. Oh, that's lovely. It's great work, you know. And I would have to deal with that. And me being quite introverted, I thought, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to shut? I'm going to shut down. And then I realized, okay, well, thank God I have someone here that if things go south,
we're going together.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah, let's have a chat out the back so I can cry. But no, it was a little scary. But it was also encouraging to know that we'd done it.
Yes.
Wasn't it?
It was the
Seeing
best
that
night.
work go up.
It was so much fun.
It was.
It was so much fun. You know, the process of getting there. I think once you go into execution mode, once I go into execution mode, yes, there's fear, but it's like, okay, we're moving forward. You know, once we committed, back to Sasha's point about getting into situations that you can't pull out of. So we put the down payment on the pop-up space. We bought the books. We printed the books. We sent out invites. I mean, the day that we actually sent out, you know, you got an email, once sending that email to you and sending the email to everybody else, it was like, okay, we cannot pull out of this. This is happening, you know. It's the fear to do it, to hit the send button is terrifying, you know, because you're literally putting yourself out there and you, all the fears. I mean, the voice in my head, actually my friend JD, who was there on the night, he flew in from New York to help us. He's a friend from college. He's made me name this voice now that talks to me, the evil one, like that says, nobody's going to turn up. This is going to be bearable. You know, they're going to laugh. Like, who are you to do this? Well, I don't want to offend the names of these people out there.
Please, you got to share it.
Okay. In true, it'll hurt. Okay, I love anybody named Victoria, but my name is Victoria.
I could see that.
Right?
Sure, yeah.
It's a Victoria. So JD JD's going to listen to this, I'm sure. So, ha, JD.
JD, thanks, buddy.
I know, thanks, love. He's like, tell Victoria to shut the heck up, you know? So it's true. So I catch myself now, like, that's Victoria talking, you know? That's Victoria talking.
But what a relief when we finally opened the doors, right?
Oh, so yeah. And in terms of getting there, you know, we had some amazing help on the night, hanging, you know, we thought we knew, well, actually we didn't, we knew we didn't know how we were going to hang the show. We were like, so we got the show, people coming in 4 hours.
We get in the space, right?
That's exactly what we said.
Yeah.
And we had somebody come in, Ellen came in and helped us because she's got a great eye for laying things out, and having a third party there that was a bit neutral, because obviously our tensions were like, and we did food, we did, you know, home catering, you know, we'd been up all night cooking all this food for everybody. So we've got like the team laying out the food, and then we've got to hang the show, and then we put in an exhibition as well, like an installation, which I would love to talk about if we have time. But yeah, the installation was really, really important to the show as well. And so we had all this stuff going on, and we had about, four hours to do it in. So,
well, tell us about the installation.
Okay, so thanks. So because of the end or the beginning, right? Fear's always at your back. Fear's always around the corner. Fear is always going to be there as part of life. We wanted to have the word fear written on the wall. So we did that. And then, but we also wanted it to be covered up, right? So we had this white chiffon material that we hung from the ceilings, and we created this drape around that people had to actually walk through. So fear was not just there in the black and yellow that we've got in the book, but it is covered, because sometimes it is. And then we, in the middle of the room, had vegan vellum type paper that people could write on what their fear was, what they were afraid of, or how they overcame their fear. And so it started a conversation and a dialogue, and people could walk through this curtain, this, you know, tangled up, you know, beautiful flowing material, but tangled up. And they could walk through into this private space where they could put their fear and cover up fear with this more translucent type paper, but yet share their fear with the world. And so that by the end of the night, this black and gold fear that was so just bold. Right. Thank you. Yes, I was looking for the word. And to have it at your back, but covered up with this beautiful paper of people's who came to support us and see the show, their fears. Fear was still there, but it was one more step removed. It was one step further away from attacking us in that night.
It was surprising to see how many people were actually genuine with it too.
Absolutely.
There was this. I mean, you go to some of these sorts of interactive things, and people don't take it seriously, or they're embarrassed, or whatever it was. But a lot of people actually dug deep and wrote some real fears.
Yeah.
down.
Somebody said that, you know, their fear was afraid of them dying or their kids dying before them. You know, somebody many people wrote about fear of not having enough money to survive. Really heavy stuff. And, not only, it didn't stop there. People actually talked about it. People on the night, were all dressed up and it's like a hype. And people were really talking to me about fear, like what they were afraid of, and thanking me and thanking Sasha for having this opportunity to express themselves. Somebody said that they had never, ever, ever said what they were truly afraid of. And they did it on the night.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's a conversation, that it is scary. I mean, me revealing just now on this podcast, what my biggest failure was, that's huge. I'm probably going to go home and be like, I can't believe I said that. But, but it's you have to walk the walk and talk the talk, right? If you want people to participate and you want people to engage with you, I have to be vulnerable back. And I found it to be a huge responsibility as well, because people actually emailed me. One person had emailed me that their parent, I can't remember if I think it was their father, had passed recently, and that they were struggling, and it was maybe actually about a different project, but it was very much in the same fashion of being vulnerable and the fear of how you deal with these things and just getting it out there. And sometimes it's very cathartic, I think.
Yeah. I guess Western culture, this myth of being fearless is considered the ideal. We see it all the time in movies and films. These people who don't feel fear, they just do these amazing things and they just don't feel it. And it's that's a psychopath.
Exactly. It's a psychopath. That's the definition of a psychopath.
But I think most people have to go through feeling fear and moving through it.
It's how you grow, artistically, as well as just as a human being. I've been told so many times, you cannot avoid your feelings. You have to walk through them in order to get to the other side. And so there's all sorts of distractions to avoid, which I do, but better when I actually just sit and think and absorb and say, this is just a feeling. I'm acknowledging my feeling of fear, and eventually that feeling will go away. Obviously there's take action, and there's things you can do to help move past it. But I think if I don't acknowledge it, I'm not being authentic.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a lot to acknowledge when you're doing this sort of work. Mm-hmm. Someone once said a phrase to me, and I've got it on repeat in my head all the time. It's fear's good because fear prepares you. Mm. And I thought,
that's
wow,
interesting.
it's if you're feeling too comfortable, or if you're not feeling fear, then you're probably not digging deep. Fear has a way of kind of making you really find that part of yourself that gives and does what needs to be done to grow.
I had this really wonderful moment at the show as well, where I don't know how to say it out loud, but basically I'd been to visit my family in Connecticut a couple weeks beforehand. See my family, I hadn't seen them in a while, and gave them a copy of the book. It was great. Sasha and I each, we had family books to give out. So I gave my dad, my stepmom, and my brother a copy. Anyway, 3 weeks later, we're at the show. My dad was calling me. He's like, where are you? I'm like, actually, he's like, what are your plans for the day? I'm like, well, my plans for the day are, here's the condensed version. Yeah. I'm going to do my show, get my hair done, and then set up for the show. And there we go. Well, he took that as I was going to go home to get my hair done. So anyway, he surprised me. He flew in from Connecticut, he missed his flight, ended up 3 different connections and went all over the country, but ended up at LAX. Went to my place. At the time I lived in Manhattan Beach, thinking I was there, turned up at my door. Of course, I'm not there. I'm up in Hollywood. Yeah. And anyway, I'm at and so I tried calling him. He called me and I'm like, Dad, I'm getting my hair done. There's a hairdryer in the background. I'm like, can I call you later? And I always try to answer my dad's call. It's just like the thing. So anyway, I say, I'll call you later. So he doesn't answer, and I call him back, and I'm like, we're 5 minutes from the show starting. We're opening the doors. And so I think I sent him a FaceTime picture or something. And anyway, the show's opening, and I was kind of sad, that my family wasn't able to partake in this, Well, turns out I'm talking to somebody. I turn around, and my dad is standing in a suit, all dressed up in his suit.
He was the best dressed guy.
He was the best dressed guy. And I turn around, and there's my dad, and I just said, Dad? I was so confused, but it was the best. It was the best gift.
There was a lot of support. There was a lot of support
Yes.
from a lot of people at that show, and it was really touching.
That's one of those things that makes it all worth it. Like I was saying, the end game makes it so happy, so happy to see so many people pitching in.
And that feeling of exhilaration, of satisfaction, when you balance it out to how you felt with respect to the fear, you realize this is why you do it.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
The thing is, you have to create those moments for yourself, even if they're relatively small.
Yep.
Even it's just the satisfaction of just getting out and shooting that day and making a good picture. Because you need those moments to sort of build on each other. Because the more you don't do, each time you make a choice not to do something, that builds
the fear.
That just builds the fear.
Yes.
So it's why the action is absolutely sort of necessary, because every day that you procrastinate or you delay doing something or you choose not to do it or allow whatever excuse to keep you from doing it, you're building something.
You are. Don't you say in your class, like, you just need to get out there and click the button a couple of times before, it's so true. Just
got to get in the mechanics of it.
Yep.
Well, you guys know the last question. I always ask for you to recommend a photographer that you have admired, that you recently discovered. Let me ask that again. I've been asking this thing for 13 years. My last question is I ask each photographer to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore, and it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why? Sasha, you go first.
Well, for me, I discovered her a few years ago, Olivia B, B-E, like as in the buzzing bee. I discovered her a few years ago by accident, and I've just been finding myself constantly clicking on her website lately, and I don't know why specifically, other than I just really love the energy that comes through in those photos. And there's just something I viscerally respond to with her work. I love her. Olivia B. Check her out.
How about you?
Well, I have recently discovered Ellen Friedlander. I love her extended framework. I think it's amazing. The travel, the way she puts that together. I had personally never seen extended frame work like that before, so that was a new discovery for me. Her eye, I love the way she sees. I think she's got a real, finesse to the way she sees, a gentleness. Yeah.
I got a chance to look at her portfolio a couple of weeks ago, and I completely agree.
Oh, good. Yeah. She's
so shout
great.
out to Ellen.
Yeah, shout out to Ellen.
Hey, Ellen.
Yay, we love you.
Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you, very nice.
But you gotta sing us out. So,
I'm going to brace myself for this. All right.
Giunse al fine il momento che godrò senza affanno in braccio all'idol mio. Timidi cure uscite dal mio petto, a turbar non venite mio diletto. Oh, come par che all'amor soffoco, la venita del loco, la terra e oggi el risponda, come la notte, i forti miei seconda.
all right.
Yeah.
That's better than I would do.
Oh, let's hear it. Let's try.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks to Sasha and Sarah for sharing their time and story with us. You can find out more about them and their work by visiting sarahmarierooney.com and sashadillonbell.com. To be the voice that introduces the episode like Ryan Katsanis did this week, just send us an audio file recorded on your phone, tablet, or computer saying something like, "This is Chauncey Gardner from Washington, D.C., and this is The Candid Frame." Say it at least a couple of times so we have something to choose from, and include 3 to 4 seconds of silence with your voice to help us clean up the audio. Also, make sure to include a link to your website, blog, or Instagram feed when you send it to info@thecandidframe.com. I have a variety of workshops I'm leading in the coming months, including one next week in Washington, D.C. at the Focus on the Story Photo Festival, a 2-day workshop in June at the Los Angeles Center of Photography, and a week-long cultural experience in Tokyo, Japan. We've also added a workshop in Vancouver, Canada in August, which I'll be teaching alongside one of my favorite photographers, Olaf Staba. Sign up soon, as spaces are limited. And if you want to get a sense of my teaching style and approach to photography, you should check out my YouTube channel, where I offer critiques and evaluations of photography submitted by TCF listeners who contribute to the Candid Frame Flickr poll. You can check out the TCF Flickr poll and our YouTube channel by clicking on the link in the show notes and the website. My recent book, Making Photographs, Developing a Personal Visual Workflow, is available. You can purchase it today and receive 40% off the list price when you order it from the Rocky Nook website. Use the promo code Pirello40 at checkout to take advantage of that discount. And if you want to keep up with all things Candid Frame, sign up for our mailing list, and you'll receive 3 free copies of my previously published ebooks. And if you like what you've been hearing on the show, please take the time to write a review in the iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast Store, or wherever you find and listen to podcasts. And if you write a review on a blog post, let me know and send me a link, because I would really like to thank you on air. You can also support the show by making a monthly contribution through Patreon, or you can make a one-time contribution via PayPal. You'll find links for both in the show notes and the website. Thanks to Timothy Floyd and Sergei Shindeman for their recent contributions. And if you want to easily access every episode of The Candid Frame, download the Candid Frame app. It's available for both Apple iOS and Android, and it's free. Download it today. You'll find it where everything else is, in the show notes or the website at thecandidframe.com. Also, we have an Alexa app, so if you have one of those smart devices, download the skill and listen to the show that way. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.